easy. Good morning and welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. This morning we certainly have a personality of some note and certainly a different perspective on the field of education. We always try to start Viewpoint with a coup or two. Matter of fact, I've got several this morning, but I'm going to limit it to one because we have a nice guest this morning, and I don't want to take the time. But the tiny houses out on the corner of College and 6th Street, we have the second tiny house built, and it was built under the auspices of Mr. Joe Shaler, a veteran who's come back to his community, working hard for the veterans we have in our community. And an associate, Marcia Fernandez, does a heck of a job in trying to get volunteers and so forth. So I'm doffing my hat in the direction of the tiny house out on the corner of 6th and College Street. And thank you, Joe Shaler and Marcia Fernandez and all of the volunteers. Let's get serious now. And, well, I thought I was serious then. Why don't you introduce our guest this morning?
That was very serious. Yes. Well, many of our listeners, I'm sure, both of them even,
both listeners,
will recognize the name when I say it. Ruth Kapik taught here in Lincoln for any number of years, and we'll get that nailed down in just a minute. She taught the primary grades. She was an excellent teacher. She's just done so much in this community. And I've known Ruth, I think, since I moved here, which is over 50 years ago. So, Ruth, I'm so glad you came to be with us today. You taught in the days when it was the 3 R's, the reading, writing, and arithmetic, didn't you?
Absolutely. Yes.
As you hear the news today, what do you think? It's changed a bit?
Just a bit, yes.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
I hear this business about fussing around with kids and their mentalities and trying to get them all screwed up on their gender and so forth. And I think to myself, what's going on? Where did we go south? Where in the world did we go wrong?
I don't know. I suppose that happened so gradually that all of a sudden
there you are.
We have changed, and I'm like you. Where did the other part go?
Were we asleep at the switch? You just wonder. Mrs. Kapik represents what I call, excuse a bad pun, the old school teachers. The old school, the way things were done right. We didn't get involved in all this new stuff that they're trying to force down our throats. But in any event, I grew up in the kind of Rose Dauber, Clara Carolyn Schum. Did that name register with you at all, Mrs. Kapik? She was the principal at Central School, and she ran that with an iron fist. And we all respect. Well, we didn't respect her. We were scared to death of her. That was the answer. But Mrs. Kapik comes to us from the days when basic education was just exactly that. So we appreciate your spending your time with us this morning. And if you have any incidents or episodes that you want to recall, don't worry, we won't get sued. We've got that covered. When did you first start teaching, Mrs. Kapik?
My first teaching job was in 1942 in Roothouse, Illinois.
Now, where is that from here?
South of Jacksonville, about 20 miles south of Jacksonville. And I taught there for 4 years and then came to Lincoln. So.
And the rest of your career was here in Lincoln?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you met lots of little primary school kids, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. I bet it's kind of fun to run into one now. And they say, "Oh, Mrs. Kapik, it's so good to see you."
Very, very nice.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is embarrassing because they recognize me, but I don't always recognize them.
Yeah.
Well, when you compare the number of teachers that a student has to the number of students a teacher has over her career, you know, you're talking about something pretty different there. Yeah.
So where did you get your primary, your education? Where did you go to school?
I started at Western Illinois University at Macomb. And I finished at Illinois State.
Is that
normal?
Mm-hmm. I had kids at both those schools, and I now have their educations all my children's educations are paid for, thank God, because now, courtesy of the government, I'm going to pay for other people's children's educations.
Yes.
Isn't that nice of me?
I hear
what
that.
a prince I am.
I hear that.
That is the dumbest. Well, I'm not. No, we're liable to get sued if I get started there, so I'll refrain from comment on that. Judy had a youngster went to Western. Oh, that's what she called it.
Cass, yeah. She
Judy-
nicknames things. She said, I went to Western. She said, I had such a good time. It was true.
But two venerable places of education. Was it difficult to get into college at the time you were a youngster coming out of high school?
I don't believe it was.
Did many of the young ladies go to college, or was it mostly
no.
a man thing?
From my graduating class, I think there were 3 of us or 4 of us maybe
Really?
that went to college. Yes.
Is that right?
It wasn't an accepted thing like it is now. Everybody, what school are you going to?
Exactly.
And a lot of them just didn't go to school.
Well, you know, my take on that particular subject is that a lot of youngsters are not actually prepared to go to the next step in education. They're not really prepared to go to college for several reasons, not the least of which is just economics, if no other reason, which is a terrible thing. So my slant is that we have Midwest Tech School down here below Springfield, which we had here in Lincoln. And I think youngsters ought to avail themselves of those opportunities to learn hands-on skills.
Absolutely.
I have a grandson that went there and went there for 9 months, and that's the best education money I ever invested. He's doing very, very well as a welder and making a significant income. So we need that type of education for youngsters.
Absolutely.
It's not inexpensive by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly college is not inexpensive. Now, when you went away to school, when you found your lodging, then did they have restaurants on the college campus for you? Or did you have to find yourself a place to eat?
I lived in a dorm, so everything was furnished at the school.
Yeah.
When I went to Western, when I went to ISU, I went back and forth. And
well, it's not very far from here to there, is it?
You know, we used to call that normal. And
yes.
we used to say that that's where the teachers went to normal to get their teaching degree.
Yes.
And that was very common expression way back in those times.
With the myriad of people you know, and it's a big bunch, what do you think are the biggest changes in education between when you started and now?
I mean, as far as curriculum is concerned?
Yes, and as far as the people themselves are concerned. For instance, I happen to feel in my heart that respect for one another is a dying art in today's society.
Yes, it is. Discipline is
That's a sad thing.
Discipline is one of the main things, home-wise and school-wise.
Yes. Why, if we had been disrespectful to a teacher in my day, we'd have had it brought up to us with no uncertain terms.
By the way, just as far as respect is concerned, we have a gentleman in charge of District 27 who's a whale of a supervisor.
Mr. Frobe.
We've had Mr. Frobe in here several times, and we respect him very much. He's just doing I always say he's kind of the Wes Protner mold. He knows exactly where he is and what he's doing. He's well organized. And the thing that's come along recently now is nutrition for these kids.
Yes.
Of course, when you and I went to school, we walked to and from home for our lunches, and there was none of this school lunch business. But now that's very, very important, and it's more so because there's a lot of did you notice the difference between is and are? I meant to tell you about that. That's plural and singular. She thinks I've lost it all. She's right. But no, seriously, there's many youngsters that don't have the advantage of being able to have the right nutrition at home. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, we have something that was totally foreign to you in your younger days of teaching, is we have one-parent families. And that was not very common at the time you were teaching. You were used to sending kids home to mother and father, and that's unfortunately not the case today. But I noted the last time we had Mr. Frobe here that they really work hard at feeding our youngsters. Now they have, what's the name of that program, Mrs. Busby, where they don't have to prepare it? Jim, do you remember? I can't. Well, we got two of us. I don't feel so bad then.
Maybe there's a germ in here that we're catching.
So, what's the biggest challenge that you faced as a young teacher, Mrs. Kapik?
I don't know when you.
There were probably many of them, as you know, just fresh off the campus and new into teaching, and
all of a sudden you're just in a classroom. However, I did have practice teaching, and that was a big help, because that introduced you to what a classroom was like, and so it was very helpful to have practice teaching. You were actually teaching
doing it,
right.
The kids.
There's a difference between doing whatever it is and reading about it, isn't there?
And really doing it, yes.
Which reminds me of something that the old man forgets all the time when we get on Viewpoint Wednesday mornings. We forget that we have sponsors, and we can't forget that, because there are reasons for being here. Go right ahead, Mr. Rash. Right back live in the studios here, WLCN, high on the hill, County Road 2250. Program this morning, of course, each Wednesday morning, 8:15 to 900. That would be, did you say something about the keys? All right, sir. We'll keep rambling then. Viewpoint, your program comes along each Wednesday morning. Our guest this morning, noted and retired teacher, we have with us Mrs. Albert Kapik, who retired in 1979, and gosh, that's a long time to be retired. And she is enjoying that well-earned retirement. How do the teachers' pensions today compare to when you retired in 1979?
Well, of course, they're much higher.
Oh, yes.
The year after I retired, teachers' pensions went up substantially.
Always
the year after I retired.
After
you retired, yes. Yeah.
Your luck must have come from the same place mine did.
And so my highest salary after teaching 35 years, my highest salary when I retired was $15,000.
Pay attention to that, folks. Pay attention to that. Your highest salary after when you completed teaching was $15,000 a year. That's just almost impossible.
And of course, your pension is based on your
on what you earn,
on your salary. So
now, how about the difference between a grade school appointment and a high school appointment? Were the high school teachers paid differently?
Now they're on about an even keel, but in those days, the high school teachers were paid more than the grade school teachers. But now it's based on different things. So
now you had taught how long
35
before
years.
You retired?
35 years.
35 years. And the lady retired at $15,000 a year retirement after 35 years in the field. You surely didn't get the job for the money.
Was there a difference in pay between grade school teachers and high school teachers
That's
at
just
that
incredible.
time?
At that time, there was.
Yeah.
And that's one big change. It's a different scale now. Their education and it's just the base is just different.
Well, and it's a different world too. Even since 1979, which isn't really all that long ago in terms of time, it's a different world than it was. We get into battles over one thing and the next. For instance, they were having trouble out in one of the eastern states about deciding whether they should teach sex ed to the third graders. I tell you, I'd have hated to have that appointment if I were a school teacher.
Yeah, that's right.
Mrs. Kapik may not want to answer this question, and I'm not certain I'm even on solid ground in answering or asking the question. But I worry about the influence, particularly not here in what I call rural America, but in their cities. Well, Springfield even, in larger cities than up. Teachers' unions, I don't know whether they've been a good thing or a bad thing, or neither one. I worry about what I read to be influence from teachers' unions, and I don't think it helps. It's not good for education. Now, I don't know whether I'm on solid ground in that opinion or not. So if you have any comments about that and you think I'm wrong, I'll be happy to listen to you.
Well, I don't have any comments one way or another because mostly when I was teaching, especially when I started, the unions were not active at all in the teaching field, and that has just gradually come into the all of the when they're trying to settle strikes or something, the unions are a big part of it, but they were not at all when I.
Well, were there strikes?
And we wouldn't have thought of striking.
Yeah.
That wasn't. If you had a job,
Yeah,
that was good.
Well, and you were dedicated to your students, and you knew that if there was a strike, that would set them back.
Well, oh yeah, sure.
648-5510. 648-5510. Somebody may have an opinion about my question to Mrs. Kapik about the influence of teachers' union and so forth, and we'd be happy to listen to you. I might even agree, although I don't think that's the case. What was did you have any real problems with student discipline and so forth? Or was it just kind of a day in, day out situation that never changed very much?
No, it didn't change. The attitudes, no, it didn't change. But I think the unions have come into it more because the parents have also become either active or non-active in union work, which reflects on the teaching field too.
Well, my father and mother were very active, and to the point that when I went out that front door to go to school, I better not get in trouble or I'd be in real trouble at home. That's how active they were.
Oh, yeah.
And we need more of that.
But
unfortunately, we have a lot of youngsters who they kind of drift in the wind because there's no real firm parental control, and that's a sad thing. And it must be very difficult for a teacher.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is very difficult now.
Well, as you read and listen to the news, do you think it's just a whole different ballgame than it was even in 1979 when you retired?
Oh, yes. Oh, it's a much different ballgame now. Yes.
One of the arguments...
I'm glad that I had my experience when I did.
I should think you would be, yeah.
And so things have changed. One of the sad things that I hear, though, is that young teachers saying, "I can hardly wait to get out."
Yeah.
And that is, to me, is sad.
Kind of underpins
Very.
the dedication factor, doesn't it? It just underpins it, takes it away.
To get up every morning, to go to work and hate it and being anxious to retire doesn't help your students very much either.
No.
Now, in your lower grades, you covered all the various subjects in one school, in one room. Well, we did that. Let's see. When I went to Central School, I guess we moved from Miss Dauber's class to Miss Anderson's class, and that was about it. I'm just trying to think back now. That was in the late 30s. Can you remember that far back?
Yeah, I was born.
Education, the curricula, I guess that's what I'm searching around for to come up with. Basics are basics. It doesn't make any difference whether it's 1937 or 2007.
As Judy says, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And in third grade is when we taught them to cursive writing, to switch from printing to cursive writing in third grade. And John Fuller mentioned that.
Yes, in his book, yes.
Yes.
Now, they don't even teach writing in school, I understand. Of course, I don't know, but they don't teach handwriting at all. But everybody prints.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you print?
Yes. Yeah. Well, if I didn't print, I'm afraid my wife wouldn't be able to read my notes to her. Which may not be the worst thing in the world.
Well, it just seems like most people now print. And
Well, I remember being taught the Palmer method. And your
The
forearm
Palmer
had to
method,
rest on the
yes.
desktop just so. You had to have the pen just so. And you're supposed to use flowing. Well, if I
But you
did
know-
that today, nobody'd be able to read my writing.
But in defense of that, it did make it legible. Really.
You didn't read my papers then, did you?
the printing,
I suppose not. Pardon?
printing, you mean?
No,
No.
she's right.
The longhand, the
cursive.
Palmer
Oh,
method.
when you're switching, yes.
Yes.
But we had a handwriting class. I mean, part of our day was we had a 15 or 20 minute handwriting class. And
I can remember making a series of zeros on the paper.
yes,
It was a long string of
Yes.
Sound like
zeros
my
when
checkbook.
we were studying the Palmer method. Yeah.
Series of zeros.
Well, that's what it was.
Yeah.
O's, maybe. Do you like that better?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I'll use O's.
History, the teaching of history. I have the opinion, and I hope I'm wrong about this, that there's a lot of revised history being published today. Not published the way history, some guy will write his version of what history was, and that's wrong. You can't change what history is that's the way it was.
yeah, yes. And now I think that, well, we had, of course, in third grade we didn't teach history as such.
No.
But now I don't think that they have a history textbook, or they don't teach history as a subject. Everything is now social studies. And
That's right.
that, I guess, covers a lot of different subjects other than just history.
Do you remember the
But
Weekly Reader?
The Weekly
Reader.
Oh,
When I was a kid in
yes,
school, they had a
yes.
little publication called the Weekly Reader, and I thought that was pretty interesting.
Friday was Weekly Reader Day, and yes, it was current events.
Which was a good thing.
Yes. I doubt if it's even published anymore.
I'd be shocked, not surprised.
Yeah. So that was a good thing to have because it was current.
Now, we had a county superintendent of schools when this old man was in school, County E.H. Lukenbill, and he would come and visit the schools.
Yes, he did.
And I remember that was some derision because he'd sit down next to somebody in a desk with him, and he was a large man.
Absolutely.
And there was a lot of tittering and tottering going on.
When Mr. Lukenbill came to visit, and he was very diligent about visiting the schools. He visited all the schools, and when he came, he would sometimes just take over your classroom and just teach whatever you were doing. But he always had some little thing to show the kids. One time he showed how you folded paper and then cut it, and when you unfolded it, you'd had a snowflake.
Yeah.
And
I bet they thought he was real smart when he did that, huh?
but the kids kind of liked for him to come. It was a diversion from the teacher, and they knew that he was going to show them something that was different.
Now, what schools were you involved in when you first started here?
I was at Monroe. When I first came to Lincoln, I was at Monroe, and then they were going to build Washington-Monroe, and so my first I think it was 3 years maybe, I was in the old building, and they were constructing the new building, and then when part of the new building was done, the part on Pekin Street was finished, and then they tore down Monroe and finished the rest of that on Sherman Street.
On the same lot then as it had
just
been.
connected it to the part that was already done. And and that was in 53. That was Lincoln Centennial year, 53. And some of we teachers wanted to call it the Centennial School.
Yeah.
But
well, that would have been appropriate.
But not so. It didn't. It turned out to be Washington-Monroe because the old Washington school had closed in the meantime.
Yeah.
And the kids came to Monroe School. And
that's how it came to be Washington-Monroe.
648-5510. Somebody may be out there, one of our two listeners, that had Mrs. Kapik as a teacher. And if you had call and say hello to her and be real nice to her. She's a lovely lady. Mr. Ash has his hand on the cutoff switch, so you can't do anything else. You might have some memories of having Mrs. Kapik as a teacher. They don't make them like that anymore. So we want to preserve her memories and appreciate all the work that went in educating lots of youngsters down through those many years. And retiring at a grand old sum of $15,000. That just sticks with me, and I just think it's so wrong after all those years, and that's the best pension you could get. So,
got a call.
Oh, we have a call here. Hang on 1 minute, please. Mrs. Kapik, there's a headset right there, and go ahead, Judith Kay.
I just went over.
I'll let Mrs. Kapik get the headset on. Here, you want this? Yeah. Yes, go right ahead, caller. I'll take care of the relaying the question to you. Go right ahead, please.
This is Marcia Boyer Hasselbrock, and I just wanted to say it's so good to hear your voice.
Oh, that's so nice.
Mrs. Hasselbrock, former
Former Boyer.
Well, thank
she was
you.
a Boyer lady.
Oh, Marcia.
One of the Boyer kids.
I know you.
I'm good, and how are you?
Oh, I'm fine.
Good. I just wanted to say hello, and it's good to hear your voice.
Well, good. Thank you.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much,
take
Rob.
care.
Thank you very much, dear.
Bye-bye.
That's nice to hear from
how
a former
nice.
student. Yes.
I had her sister and her brother, too.
Sure, I suppose. Well, they'd all live in the same neighborhood.
That was what Clint Eastwood called "Made Your Day." Yes, well, great.
That was
fun.
Anybody
very
else
nice
out
of
there
Marcia.
might want to call in and say hello to Mrs. Kapik. Anybody that labored in the trenches as long as she did deserves her everlasting thank you and credit. And she's here trying to remember some of the old days. And if she's like I am, she can't remember what she did last week, let alone 40 years ago. So anybody else have a 648-5510?
One of the projects that you had in your retirement, I know because I was talking with her, was working with Marion Fuller, who was working with John Fuller on his book. And she said that Marion had said that you had a really good time working together on that project.
Well,
What are some of the other projects that you come up with?
well,
I'm sure you keep busy.
I have, I volunteer, and I still volunteer
Good for you.
at the Pink Shutter, the hospital thrift shop.
Yes.
And I have been volunteering at the food pantry, but since the pandemic, I don't. They don't come into the food pantry anymore. It's drive-by. They fill boxes and people drive by, so I don't work there now. Some people still do, but I haven't gone.
Carolyn Webster does a whale of a job with the Holy Family Food Pantry. And just last week, a week ago today, Mrs. Busby and I drove by the food pantry there for Holy Family, and there was a fellow there with his bicycle. Mind you now, two of them, they had two bikes, and one of the bikes had a little cart. And I thought to myself, boy, there's real need there, obviously. We're using a little bicycle and a cart to come get what he needed to get by,
Well, that's
or what
good.
they needed. So thank God for the food pantries. And you go down Logan Street near the day that's open, and you see the cars there, and you know there's lots of need. So thank God for the food. Thanks for the volunteers. And Carolyn Webster does a way. She just wears herself out with the Holy Family food pantry there. And this is, by the way, this is the day. So she and her volunteers will be hard at work as we are on the air now. Is there a PTA association like it used to be?
I have no idea.
Parent Teachers Association. That's what that meant, folks. PTA,
Parent
and
teachers.
they were supposed to be, as I understand it. Now you correct me now. A liaison between the students and the families and the
Exactly right.
teachers.
And the PTAs were very active in Lincoln, and I have no idea whether they even have PTAs or not now.
I don't know either, of course.
We had monthly meetings. They did, but the teachers, we had to appear, of course. And now I don't really know whether they have active PTAs or not.
I would just assume, without knowing a doggone thing at all about it, that there's a void there when you lose that relationship between the parents and the school situation,
Yes.
school authorities. It's a matter of communication, and maybe Mrs. Busby.
I'm waiting my turn.
All she has to do is slap me on the shoulder, but she got her hand up. Go right ahead, Mrs.
Well,
Busby.
Ruth will be familiar with hands in the air, won't you, from school days? As you talk to others who are still engaged in teaching, what are some of the biggest differences that you gather from your visits?
Discipline.
Discipline, yeah.
Is it frowned upon to discipline a child anymore? Physically? They used to.
Oh, physically, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Imagine you could go to jail, couldn't you?
You don't. You don't
yeah.
touch the kids.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. But
Well, as far
how
as
do
my
you
father
get-
and mother were concerned, it was if I
You
needed
know,
a slap, that was okay with them, because I was going to get worse when I got home. And we miss parents who were not supportive of teachers. And I think that's extremely important for a youngster to know that they're go out that front door and go into that school door, that they're supposed to appreciate and respect. And I emphasize respect their teachers.
At the end of the day, when I would stand at the door, and as each kid went out, not hug them, but maybe just a pat on the shoulder or
Yeah.
touch the head, and now you
Can't
you
do
don't-
that.
Is that right?
You don't do that.
What?
Well, that's
What
throwing
do
out
you
the baby
think-
with the bathwater, isn't it? That's kind of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
No. But, so it was.
Go ahead. I'll just talk among myself.
Well, she didn't have her hand up, Jim. So the one thing that you miss would be what, as far as teaching retirement is concerned? What was the one thing you would miss? Would it be your daily contact with youngsters?
Oh yeah, yes. You miss the kids. Oh yeah.
But now those kids are all grown up, but I bet you run into them on the street and in the grocery store.
We
and
just
what
had
have you.
one on the phone.
Isn't
I
it
do.
kind of fun?
I do.
To touch base and see how they
Yes,
turned out?
Just like Marcia calling. And
Yes. Yeah.
And I do see them. And
That's the
perhaps
nice-
I see some that I don't recognize either.
Well, because all of your students have done just exactly what I've gone ahead and done, gotten older.
No.
And there's a lot of that going around, you know. And we don't look like we used to.
Do you find regulations coming down from, say, the State Board of Education, filtering down from the top, so to speak, that are onerous and not easy to fulfill? Well, of course, you've been retired all
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
Education's changed in the years
I
you've
don't
been.
have any
Yeah.
clue about how it affects the classroom. I don't know that. So
One of the
I'm sure it would,
Yeah.
but I don't know how it would connect what the difference would be. I don't know that.
One of the arguments that is going on within some school districts in the country is who should be in charge for policy making. Should it be the parents of the children, or should it be the school board?
Well, that's-
Well,
If you were back in the school and able to vote on that, what do you think? Where should the impetus come from?
well, I think that's the job of the school board, is to
exactly.
establish policy.
Parents out there aren't familiar with what needs to be done. Education in general, period, but they don't know the ramifications of all the things that have to be organized and so forth. For instance, what time are we going to dismiss school? Now, in my day, when it came time for crop time, we dismissed farmer youngsters early to get home and help Dad. Practical.
Yeah.
Probably not the most sensible thing about it, but if you think about it, it sure as heck was, because it was putting food on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but now I'm not sure whether I think now if parents disagree with the board, they're apt to voice their opinions more than in olden days. They just accepted the board said this or that, and now I think parents do raise questions if they don't agree with something.
And if they do it respectfully, that's fine.
Well,
But that's
yes.
that's the key.
Sure,
You know,
sure.
militancy is just not going to work. If
Have
it's
you
gonna-
noticed how many times this morning the word respect has come into our conversation?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
it's just something that we who aren't 29 anymore miss and notice its absence.
Mrs. Kapik, would you like to sum up? We have a couple of minutes left. If you can squeeze the end of your career into a few words, you'd like to have the microphone for a few seconds here?
Oh, well, I'm glad I became a teacher. I told my parents, I don't know what age, but I wanted to be a teacher. And I don't know if that was a reflection of the teachers that I had in school. I went to a country school, and so I don't know why, but I just always wanted to become a teacher, and I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I had my teaching experience when I did.
But you used that word country school, and some of our listeners don't realize that what that says is you went all 8 grades in one school.
Absolutely, yes.
One schoolroom, one
We lived
teacher for 8 grades.
We lived a half a mile from school, and we walked to school.
Sure.
We didn't hear of, unless it was bad weather, we didn't get a ride to school. And some kids lived further away than we did, and so we'd kind of wait till they came along, and then we'd all walk to school together.
Did you have lunch at school?
No,
though?
we took our lunch.
You,
So you
a
could lunch
big
bucket.
lunch.
We had carried a dinner bucket.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
An old-fashioned hip-top dinner bucket. That's what they
yes,
were, with
We
the thermos bottle
we
on the
didn't
top.
hear of. Even when I went to Root House to teach, they did not have lunches at school. I didn't hear of lunches at school till I came to Lincoln, and at the old Monroe School, there was a basement in the school, and we had a lunchroom down there, and a little tiny kitchen, and Mrs. Anna Stump was the cook. But all of the kids didn't stay for lunch. Just some of the kids, the ones that wanted to. And
So our guest this morning, Judith K. I'm sorry, that clock just ran out on us. Our guest this morning is Mrs. Albert Kapik, Mrs. Ruth Kapik, who a retired teacher. One that if you see her on the courthouse square, take off your hat and then say hello to her. Requires our respect for laboring in the trenches a long time. Thank you very much for being with us, my dear.
well, you're welcome. You're welcome.